Welcome to DroneCast, Rethinking Public Safety One Drone at a Time, a podcast by DroneSense. We explore real-world applications of drones in emergency response, offering a close examination of evolving trends in drone technology and its impact on public safety. I'm your host, Joe Kearns, Strategic Partnership Manager here at DroneSense. And hey, as you're listening, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe there's a story or a challenge from your own experience that resonates, or is there a topic you'd like me to cover in future episodes? Reach out to us on LinkedIn by searching for DroneCast, Rethinking Public Safety One Drone at a Time, or visit dronesense.com/dronecast to share your thoughts. Your feedback helps shape the show, and you might just inspire our next episode. Now, let's dive into today's conversation on advancing public safety through drones. Welcome to DroneCast, Rethinking Public Safety One Drone at a Time. I'm your host, Joe Kearns, and today we're joined by Rich Gatanis, a pioneering figure in integration of drone technology with hazardous material operations. Rich serves as the UAS Coordinator at Southern Manatee Fire Rescue and has been instrumental in developing innovative approaches to using drones in hazmat situations. In part one of our conversation, we'll explore Rich's journey from banking to firefighting and then the evolution of their drone program, and then some groundbreaking applications in hazmat operations. Welcome, Rich, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Appreciate it.
Well, Rich, you've had such a fascinating career. What initially drew you to public safety?
I started in the fire service in 2003. So a lot of the guys who came online, the same time I did, and it was an impact from 9/11. I think that hit hard for a lot of us to join the fire service and serve. And then there was a part of me too, just being a husband, father, I had to start thinking more career as opposed to finding jobs. And that was a good fit. But I'll say that the funny story is, and it's a quick one, is I used to be in banking, and I was working at a bank and sitting at my desk, and outside of my window that was right across from my desk, I was across the street, was the Sarasota County Fire Academy. And I would sit there every day watching these guys out there. They looked like they were just having a blast. And I don't want to call it a crisis, but I'd sit there at my desk just hating my job. And I'm like, man, that's what I want to do. So I went home, told the wife, I want to join the fire service. And within about a year, through fire school, EMT school, I got pretty lucky. I was blessed to be able to get hired right on immediately within a year of going through all that process. Because at the time, it was hard to get the fire service. A lot of people trying to get on. So I got pretty lucky in Manatee County, in the county that I live in. And yeah, it was 21 years ago, and it's been the best decision I ever made. It's opened so many doors for me. Obviously, the drone industry has been a huge passion of mine, and I wouldn't ever be here without the influence that the fire service and the public safety world kind of brought to me.
That's an awesome story. Now, I get to spend time with people on our team like Coy Kessler and such, and he always makes the joke that, I don't think it's a joke, but when you join the fire service, it's like winning the lottery. Is that kind of the same for your side too?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a dream job in the fact that it's like getting paid for 25 years to be in a fraternity. There is no normalcy to it. Every day is different. You never know what you're going to be rolling into. And you get to do it with your buddies every single day and hanging out. And, you go through some experiences and then they pay you for it.
Bonus. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, when did drone technology enter the picture for you?
So we kind of started looking into that in about 2015. My battalion chief, Chris Gould, who's been the biggest champion for me and in our fire department to build a drone program. In the beginning, he showed up, he went to FDIC, which is the Fire Department International Conference, and talking about John McBride and RMUS, but I think RMUS was there. And he comes back and he says, hey, what do you think about getting a drone for our hazmat team? And I remember thinking, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Who would put a drone? This is 2015, and it was very early on. There weren't a lot of fire departments, at least for that matter, that were operating unmanned systems. And I'm like, it's a terrible idea, but I'll look into it. At the time, I was doing a lot of our video training or training videos and some technical stuff. So they're like, oh, Rich does videos. He must say, let's put it on his plate. He's a video guy. And I started looking into it. I'm like, you know what? There's actually an application here. I mean, we could use this. And initially we thought about having a drone just like everybody else does for like an eye in the sky kind of perspective, like scene safety. And that was a piece of it. But we started to realize there's a lot that we can do with drones. So we started to do some experimenting, and we were pretty fortunate in the fact that our department's a small agency. It's a lot less red tape. So when we decided to start doing flammable testing, and maybe we'll get into those questions later, but we did flammability testing on drones. We started putting drones into flammable atmospheres like propane and hydrogen gas and see what happens. So by doing so, we started to realize that we could push these systems to do things that I think most people weren't ready for or were afraid to do. And we did some pretty cool stuff, and that's kind of like the catalyst of where our program started.
I can see this like, wait, what? Drones and hazmat? Hold on. You're crazy, man. But how much this technology has evolved even since 2015. I mean, just even from yesterday, geez, this industry is changing so much. And there's this evolution of tech that is occurring in front of us. And that's amazing. Now, Rich, can you tell us how the Southern Manatee Fire Rescue got started using drones? And what were some of the initial challenges you faced? And how did you manage to overcome them?
Yeah, so and I would say some of our challenges are the same as a lot of agencies have had to deal with early on, and especially back that 10 years ago, because it wasn't being used very often in public safety. There was a lot of questions from an administrative perspective, like, hey, how do we put these in our as a response, as a tool? How do we regulate it? What do we do about the FAA? The FAA was one of our big challenges back then because the FAA saw all these drones by public safety agencies going in the air, and they're like, hold on, wait, what's going on? So a lot of hoops we had to jump through. In the fire service, most of our tools on the truck are just at their tools. They're not hard to train on. There's no regulation to most of the stuff that we do. So now we're implementing this piece of technology that has huge implications with federal agencies now, and that could come back to bite us in the long run. So there was a whole legal side of it that we had to get solved. And, I'll say that there was a ton of folks in the industry, even before we got in, that were huge help in helping pave that way, because without them, we probably would have just said, forget about it. This is too much work. But because there were other guys blazing the trail for us, again, you mentioned John McBride, Dave Merrick with Florida State University was one of our big helps moving our program forward. So once we got over the regulatory side of it, the other hurdle was the buy-in from our own internal administration of it, right? So it was a tool that a lot of people weren't familiar with, or how to use it, how to implement it. And there's the same fire service. We are 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. So when you bring technology into what we're doing, there's sometimes a bit of a pushback from what we call the old dogs. Not that there's anything wrong with pushback. There's always that's good to question everything and make sure you do it the right way. But because that's how we did it in our day is a common theme in the fire service. It was hard to get that over that hump. As I mentioned before, I'm a battalion chief. He was sold immediately. And so he helped every time there was an opportunity to put a drone in the air, he took it. And then we also, to get buy-in from not only from our community, which wasn't very difficult from the fire side because, everybody loves firefighters. The cops have a harder challenge than we do using drones because they're not, people think cops are spying on them, and firefighters there to help people. So that wasn't a huge issue. But what we started doing is kind of pimping it out, our capabilities to our surrounding agencies, both fire and law enforcement. And because nobody else around us were using drone technology, anytime the sheriff's office needed support from a drone, they'd call us. Anytime the police department, the Coast Guard, everybody knew we had this capability, so they would reach out and we would go support them. And that we got huge kudos for doing that. Now, most of those same agencies operate their own drone programs now. So, so that was kind of cool in the fact that we were able to be the catalyst to help these other agencies kind of like bring their own program forward. But internally it was a challenge at first. Now our own commission board sees and recognizes the need for unmanned systems in our response. And they've been so great at making sure that we get all the tools that we need to be effective. And once they see it, and that's what it boils down to. A lot of times here we have the technology. They don't really know how to get into the fold. But when we started making videos, and it's on our YouTube channel, which check out SMFR 911 if you get a chance. But we started pushing all that out, and the aha factor showed up, and everybody's like, "Well, it makes sense. This is exactly why we need these kind of tools."
I was just about to say that, Rich. It's always that aha thing, right? Like that, like, oh, whoa, okay. This is not a toy. This is a tool. This is incredible.
Yeah, and again, go back to the YouTube channel. That has become instrumental in other agencies. So because we started doing a lot of crazy stuff with Hazmat, there was agencies that I've spoken to, and I've been all over the planet and to almost every state in the union, and talking and working with agencies. And our videos, I've heard time and time again, they're like, "Hey, what you guys are doing with the Hazmat, we were able to show that to our administration." They're like, "Okay, yeah, that now it makes sense." So putting this stuff out and putting it out there for everybody to see has been huge. And some of these other agencies being able to stand up their own programs, being able to get over that hump, so to speak.
Integrating new technology is always tough, but I'm sure there's some hurdles that you could probably speak to about when bringing something such as advanced as drone technology compared to maybe the axe or something. Could you expand on a hurdle you had to get past when bringing that kind of technology?
Yeah, no, that's actually a good one. I'd say it's a question that we are still constantly always, I don't want to call it, say battling. That's a question that we're always striving to answer. And because it hazmat, we deal with a lot of unknowns, right? You got flammable atmospheres, you got chemicals, you got decontamination, all these different things that we have to think about when you're talking using drone technology. So those are always the first questions that come up, like, hey, how do you fly a drone into a flammable atmosphere? Well, we had to test these things, right? So we knew we couldn't just fly it in not knowing what was going to happen, because everything that we do, all of our meters, all of our equipment on our hazmat truck have to be what they call intrinsically safe, because we don't want that particular thing to be the catalyst that sets off of, flammable atmosphere, so to speak. So by taking these challenges and creating the test methods that we needed to be able to test these systems, for example, the big first one we were always questioned with was if it goes into propane or hydrogen gas or some sort of flammable gas, what happens? Well, we need to test that. So we developed a box we could pump propane into, pump hydrogen gas into, to get to the explosive limits with the drone inside of it, and then we fly the drone to see what happens, right? We wanted to test these. Now, there is no such thing as an intrinsically safe drone. Most manufacturers will never, I don't know of any manufacturer that will put an intrinsically safe value on their equipment. However, we know these systems, they do have, because they have brushless motors, they're not creating sparks, they're not creating all these issues that could cause flammability. So we knew that we could use these in and around these environments. So we had to test it first. And we did that. And we worked with DJI testing their stuff, Brink drones. We're using Skydio now. There's a bunch of different tests that we have, again, on our YouTube channel. You can see the videos. But that kind of checked a box for us. And it's not for us to be able to say, hey, look, now we know we can fly a drone into a known cloud of hydrogen gas. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, if I'm flying this aircraft in and around an environment that may be potentially flammable, we're not concerned about the drone being the ignition source, right? So that was kind of to check that box. And by testing that, it allows us to use these things and not be concerned about the drone itself being the spark, so to speak. But in our videos, you'll see too, not only do we test them, but we, true Mythbuster style, we blow them up at the end just to show that the atmosphere is flammable.
Always a good blow up. I'm always down to see that. Well, it sounds like, you've been using drones for all sorts of different hazmat situations, air monitoring, flammable gas detection. Could you share some more details and examples of how your team has used drones in those scenarios?
So there's a couple different ways that I think that are kind of the out of the box kind of application that I think a lot of folks maybe not necessarily are using or thinking of using it. Again, initially we were just like, hey, put the drone up and we can see the scene, and that's great. Scene safety, your technician safety, being able to keep eyes on is probably the most important part, having a drone in the air, because we get a better understanding of what's going on. The whole team around you can see the incident. They can see what the environment they're walking into even before they get into there, right? So that's the great thing about it. But there's also some applications where we would just take a drone and it doesn't need to fly to be effective, right? The drone is a camera. It's got radio signal back to a video somewhere who's receiving it. So if you're doing interior work, hazmat technicians walking into let's say a clandestine laboratory where they're a meth lab or something, We can't fly in there, but they can carry the drone in, set it down next while they're working so we can watch what they're doing. These drones have thermal imaging on them. So if you have some of these labs that have volatile chemicals in it, we can see thermally if there's any reactivity happening in some of these containers. We also get to now have an eyes on approach with the techs inside working. And another application too is when they're done, let's say we're moving teams in and out, they leave the drone in there, the new team comes out, and we still have eyes on what's happening inside until that new team gets into the siege. That's one simple way of using a drone. And matter of fact, doing it that way, the battery lasts a lot longer. We get, 3 hours out of that battery if we wanted to, depending on the side of the drone, obviously. But another one is we developed air monitoring capabilities. So early on, it was like, hey, how do we detect for flammable gases? A big part of what we do is trying to determine the scene that we're going into, what kind of gear or ensemble our firefighters going to wear. Is it a flammable atmosphere? Then they got to put bunker gear on, right? Because if it does flash or if there's an explosion, we want them protected from the heat. If it's a chemical or biological, we need to put like a fully encapsulating suit on, what they call a level A suit. Sometimes you don't know what those are. You don't know what the chemical is. So you have to test the air by attaching different meters to our drone, flammable gas meter, chemical, biological meters, radiation detectors onto a drone, and you push that into the environment. And now the drone is acting as your responder. So it's giving us all the information we need before we even send the first crew in. A lot of what we do has we're prepping to do the work. So there could be 1 or 2 missions before we even get the work start turning wrenches because we're doing recon. We have to figure out what the problem is. We got to figure out what the gas is, what the liquid is. But by pushing a piece of equipment in there, one, it's safety for your technicians, right? We're not pushing somebody in there to an unknown. 2, we're limiting the number of missions we actually have to push guys into there. And I always say it like this, we're in Florida in August. You put a guy in a level A for any period of time, he's going to be, spent by the time he's done. So if we can cut the number of missions down in half by how many people we got to push in, that's firefighter safety 101 right there, right? It's cutting down time inside of the incident, inside those level A's. So those are just a couple examples. I mean, there's advanced air monitoring, I think, is the big one. Anytime we have a spill outside, an overturned rail car, overturned tanker, or overturned whatever it is, a lot of times instead of having a guy there holding a meter, just air monitoring at the street corner of, 53rd and 44th, whatever. Now you could almost just land a drone in that area and let the drone do the air monitoring for you. And you got a camera on it, you're watching it. Like right now, we have a sensor that we use on our drone. It actually has LTE built into the flammable gas detector. So that information is pushed right back to our command post, GPS location. We know the drone's got cameras. We can see what's going on. So we're constantly air monitoring without putting a person in that location. So these are just a few examples. And we could do a whole series on that.
Well, Rich, you're really thinking outside the box. I mean, even just using the tech that is built on the drone or that you have added with these sensors and so on, and just walking it in and perching it, right? Just like sitting it in the situation. Brilliant. Like it doesn't necessarily have to fly. And it also just speaks to the technology that is on board these incredible aircraft and such. I mean, I'm already thinking of that. I do, drones are so multifaceted on the side. I also do like commercial filming and stuff like that. And I sometimes just hold the drone because it's such an excellent gimbal, but using it in this sense, that's a smart way to look at it. Now, you had mentioned explosives. You had mentioned blowing drones up, but more so just for fun. I mean, for science. But go ahead. Have you utilized drones in explosive testing? And then what are some of the benefits you've seen from using drones in these high-risk situations?
So I'm assuming, like, I guess when you say explosive, you're talking about in flammable gases. Is that what you're referring to?
Sure. We can expand on that further, but I mean, I'm not somewhere in this world of expertise. I'm thinking of maybe it's aftermath. I mean, you've already mentioned that you don't want to you want to be very cognizant of not letting the drone catch the atmosphere on fire. Is there anything you could expand on in those kind of other high risk situations?
Well, let me give you a couple examples, some things that we have done that I think will lay a little bit of, give you some information. One of them, we had a scene one time where a facility that was back in the 80s and 90s used to produce ammonium nitrate for fertilizer, right? The fertilizer plant, that's what they're making. Well, they had gone out of business and, I think before they went out of business, nobody knew this, but they had started just dumping a lot of their ammonium nitrate stuff into the ground and just covering it up, right? No big deal, it's fertilizer, but the quantities at which they had it was, it was a big deal. And when a new developer moved in, started moving piles, started burning stuff, all of a sudden we had this underground, what we were calling the Florida Volcano. So we were getting these weird plumes of smoke rolling out. And I don't know if I had it on my YouTube channel or not, but if not, I'll make sure I get it on there. But pillars of smoke coming out, and nobody knew what it was. A weird looking smoke, weird the way it was billowing. So we had to test that. But being able to have a drone in there to be able to put eyes on, do some remote air monitoring, understanding what's going on, kind of check boxes, right? Everything we do, we're checking box, making sure it's not flammable. Okay, what is it? Chemical? What is it? What kind of chemical is it? Radiological. So those are the boxes that we want to check. Turns out it was a pretty big deal. Lots of ammonium nitrate in the ground. And if you remember the explosion, I think, I don't know, probably about 5 years ago, the Beirut, Lebanon explosion at the port there, that was ammonium nitrate, right? Ammonium nitrate's been used in, clandestine explosives for a long time. So huge hazard that could have potentially been bad. Luckily, it was mostly underground, and we ended up putting a ladder truck out with extended and just blasting it with water for, I want to say they did for like 24 hours, just deluge in this area with water to saturate it. So that was a big deal because it was extremely dangerous, extremely volatile potentially. And you could have put a lot of guys at risk, but we were able to check a lot of those boxes by using a piece of tech, right? A $5,000-$10,000 drone was a lot cheaper than one of your guys, right? And I would say, going back to your question about, like, let's say aftermath, we deal with a lot of hurricanes here. I would say the damage that happens here can be associated with like an explosion that took place. We went through, I think this last couple months has been pretty crazy here, but drones have been a huge piece of that too. Disaster mapping, rapid mapping are such a integral part now of any public safety agency that's operating a drone for tornadoes, hurricanes, to be able to quickly get information back, wide area maps, real time, to be able to make decisions. I don't think you could put a price tag on that. It allows folks to have a better understanding where to put resources. And what's cool is a lot of times we get the before and the after, right? You have your Google image that's kind of been there for a few years. It's usually 1 or 2 years older. And then you can show what it looks like now, and you can kind of understand where this house is supposed to be, where that road is supposed to be, that way is. So those are the kind of like some of the tech or the applications that I think kind of get missed in, when we think of public safety, like, oh, they got a drone to caught a bad guy, or we saved a kid. But there is such a huge side of the industry or side of the use case that gets kind of overshadowed a little bit, which is fine. It doesn't matter. It's just another tool. But those are so invaluable to the response effort that it's hard. Like I said, it's hard to put a price tag on that.
You had mentioned you're in Manatee County. My folks are living a little bit lower in Cape Coral area, and I've gone down there and helped the mapping of when the hurricanes have gone through and rerouted Sanibel and all those different islands down there and so on, and changed and had new canals or the sands here. It's wild. And having this kind of technology, you would even know that maybe that's there or there's a hazard or a danger. Absolutely incredible. Well, that wraps up part 1 of our conversation with Rich Gatanis. Join us for part 2, where we'll dive into the evolving landscape of drone legislation, Rich's perspective on future technologies, and valuable advice for agencies looking to start their own programs. Thanks for listening to DroneCast, and we'll see you next time.
DroneCast, Rethinking Public Safety One Drone at a Time, is brought to you by DroneSense. To find out more about DroneSense and how our comprehensive situational awareness platform can help you fly, share, and manage your drone program, please visit DroneSense.com. That's DroneSense.com. And then make sure to search for DroneCast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that podcasts are found. Please don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at DroneSense, thanks for listening.